I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Sabrina I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Happy Thursday, Thirsty Thursday for some of you out there. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And what is going on, guys? I hope you had a great day yesterday. I am back. Have some interesting stories to talk about tonight, and we are going to do call in tonight after the show. So I look forward to hearing from you guys over there as well. Want to go ahead and give quick shout outs to people in the chat. What is up, Yonina? I don't know if it even counts as reparations at this point. They put colored faces up to talk about reparations, and that's cool. Those colored faces didn't do this to us. Interesting. Shout out to Oz, says subscribe and share, please. Sabby is one of the best in company with our sisters and brothers in independent media today. A voice for the people without ego or hubris. Thank you all. 50K subs by July 4th. Oh, we will see, Oz. that will be a big jump. A big jump for me. But yes, go ahead and hit that like button, guys. That helps me out with the algorithm. If you're new, subscribe. Hello. Hello. Also, if you're new, please note I do have my newsletter pinned to the top of the chat. Sign up for that. And that's how you'll know every time I go live, you'll get a notification from me via email. I don't rely on YouTube notifications. They have failed me in the past and they still fail me now. So sign up for that. All you do is enter your email address and voila, all done. All done. Shout out to Soul, says, in unity is when we change the tide, rage against the war machine. Shout out to Philip, says, know me, I be voting third party in 2024. I hear you, Philip. Shout out to Joe, says, good evening, family and friends. Greetings, Kim, says, hi, Sabrina. Shout out to Robin, says, glad to be in the house this evening. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's do it. Shout out to Hannah, says, Sabby got 30K. Yes. Thank you guys so much for your support. I have reached 30K subscribers. I'm super excited about that. I can't believe that's actually happened, to be honest. Must mean I'm doing something right, right? I must be doing something right. But yeah, I'm super pumped. I'll talk about that another time. Maybe I'll do like a special segment or something for that. Shout out to Angela, who is a Sabby member, says, greetings, Sabby and Sabby chat. Jimmy Dore smeared. Must be a day ending in Y. It must. What's going on? Pitchforks are coming. Thank you so much for becoming a Sabby member. I'm going to give you a big whoop, 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 whoop. Shout out to Desert Mantis, says, hey, pitchforks are coming. Thanks for memberizing yourself. You might just make Sabby's day. Oh, you did. You did. What's going on? Gamer says, hello. Shout out to Hugh. Used to just watch Jimmy Dore, but after seeing you cover the fundraiser in New York with AOC and Jamal Bowman, I am definitely going to watch you on the regular and spread the word. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Hugh. Shout out to Sun Moon, says, Sabby, MF Sabs, loved seeing you on Rising. Your voice is so important, and anytime I get to see Robbie's face look hurt from someone with substance always makes my day. Do be MF do. Greetings, Anthony sends love. Anthony's a Sabby member. Shout out to Casey, sends solidarity and fire. Greetings, Mark says 8 p.m. Time to fire up a bowl and watch Sabs. Oh dear. Shout out to GL says doobie doobie doo. What's going on, Peggy? Says Sabby, so great to see you on Rising again. You are always spot on. Thank you so much. Yeah, I really, I like going on there and having like those discussions. Shout out to Miguel says, peace, happy Thursday. What's going on, Kyle, who's a Sabby member? He sends a rooster Z. I'm not really sure what that means. What's going on, Rick says, hey, y'all. Shout out to my comrade JB says, hi, everyone. Rock on, Sabs, rock on. Greetings, Randy says, good evening, comrades. Shout out to Robert. I have no idea what you're talking about, Sabby. Cheers. Greetings, Jay says, good evening, Sabby. What are your thoughts on Seymour Hersh's report about the U.S. direct involvement in the Nord Stream explosion? I haven't had a chance to look at that just yet. I saw a glimpse of it on Twitter, but I would need to dive into it. What is going on? Black Uni Gryphon says, yo. Right back at you. Shout out to Betsy with 2 E's. Says, happy almost in this stressful, crazy week. I hear you. What's going on, Nikolai? Glad to see you live, Sabs. Glad to see you here. Shout out to Sabby. Sabs said, I had to resubscribe. I hate YouTube. Yeah, that's been happening to people. I've had to, like the past week, there were 2, I don't say their names on here, but there were 2 channels that I had to resubscribe to. And I did not remove myself. So there's that. Shout out to Sean says, yeah, what's going on? I cannot read your name, but could you interview Ben Norton? I can. I would have to find a way to get in touch with him. I don't think I have that information. I think I looked at this one time before to see if I could find info for him. But yeah, I could do that. Shout out to George says, can't reform police, can't reform the deep state. They need abolishing. Shout out to Sebastian says, hey, y'all. I have to say it that way. I got to do it that way. All right. All right. Shout out to Roger Meadows says they were all Uber customers I suggested to your show. Thank you so much, Roger. That is so sweet. And greetings, Laugh66 says, have a great show. I'm working in 7 hours, hitting the sack. We'll catch up on replay. Ponder replay, man. Ponder replay. Greetings. Pechico says, hi, Sabby, and everybody. And Pechico is also a Sabby member. Let's go ahead and get started. I got a lot to discuss. I want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. You guys are doing the damn thing, as always. Shout out to Sabby patrons. If you're interested in becoming a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. I still have to add the newer ones to the bottom of the ticker, but I'll try to get that done this weekend. But also, I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Michael Foley. Thank you so much and welcome. Really do appreciate the support. Okay, what are we talking about tonight? Let's go ahead and get into that thumbnail, man. Silly mood tonight. I don't know what's happening. Okay, tonight I am discussing Jimmy Dore smeared. If you have not heard about that hit piece that's been put out against Jimmy Dore, we're going to dive into that tonight. I'm also going to discuss the Biden defenders. AOC and Pramila Jayapal jump in to defend President Biden's cringe remarks during the State of the Union address. We are going to talk about that. And I'm also going to discuss Mayor Michelle Wu Boston reparations. So I think I mentioned this to you guys before briefly, that there were plans to put together a reparations task force. Well, it looks like that has actually happened. So I'm going to talk about that tonight as well. And I'm also going to cover the last 2 ballot initiatives for Massachusetts. So we'll do that tonight. Little bit of West Side Story for you. All right, let's get back into Massachusetts. In 3, 2, 1. Massachusetts changes to alcohol retail licensing initiative. Make this a little bit bigger. Okay, a yes vote supported this ballot initiative to incrementally increase the combined number of retail beer and wine licenses and all alcoholic beverage licenses, including liquor, an establishment could own from no more than 9 in 2022 to no more than 18 by 2031. Limit the maximum number of licenses for sale of all alcoholic beverages an establishment could own to 7. Prohibit in-store automated or self-checkout sales of alcohol. Change the formula used to calculate fines by using gross profits on all retail sales rather than gross profits on the sale of alcohol. And add out-of-state driver's licenses to the list of approved identification under State Liquor Control Act. I want to talk about that last piece here about the out-of-state driver's licenses. This was new to me when I moved to Massachusetts, but apparently, technically, in Massachusetts, out-of-state driver's licenses are actually not considered to be approved for alcohol sales in Massachusetts. It's really weird considering we have a lot of colleges in Massachusetts and there's a lot of out-of-state students as well as international students. So they can refuse sale to you if you are from New Jersey per se, and you have an out-of-state New Jersey driver's license, they can do it. From my experience, most people I've encountered are not doing this, but if they wanted to, they could, right? So how can you get around that? One of the things that you can do is you can use your passport instead if you have a passport, but it can be a pain in the neck for you if you have an out-of-state driver's license and you're either visiting here or you just moved here for college or something like that. It's a weird rule. I've never encountered that before. But this initiative in particular primarily has to deal with licenses and how many you can have. This measure did not pass. The vote was 55.10%. That one's a close one. I think some people were confused about the wording of this as well, but I think it's important to talk about what it would have done. What would question 3 have done? It would have incrementally increased the statewide limit on the combined number of retail alcohol licenses an establishment could have, which includes licenses for all alcoholic beverages, including liquor, wine, malt, and beer. Here were the increases that would have happened from 9 licenses to 12 by January 1st, 2023, which would have already happened, from 12 to 15 by January 1st, 2027, and from 15 to 18 by January 1st, 2031. Massachusetts is an interesting state. Like, in some ways it can be progressive in the sense that we did legalize, marijuana here. We were the first state to do so on the East Coast. And we did also implement cannabis shops here, which are doing very well financially, by the way. But at the same time, there are still some of these old school, like Puritan laws when it comes to alcohol. Like, for example, you cannot purchase beer or any other type of alcohol on Sundays in Massachusetts until after a certain time, right? Outlaw. Happy hour was removed from Boston. That was done by Mayor Menino. So if you go to a bar or something here and they say happy hour, they're talking about food. We don't have happy hour for alcohol. That was something that Mayor Menino did away with. So it's weird. It's like in some ways, Massachusetts will be somewhat progressive, but in other ways, it still has these old school, like Puritan elements to it, which never really made much sense to me. I still never really figured that out, and I've been here for almost 11 years. So that's that. Now, who supported this? Save More Spirits supported it. That's a liquor store here. And Massachusetts Package Stores Association. So alcohol stores here are called package stores. That was new to me when I moved here. I didn't understand what people meant when they were like, let's go to the package store. And I was like, I don't need any packages. So that was kind of weird to me. Other states I've lived in called them ABC stores, which is alcohol beverage containers. So that's what they're referring to when they say package stores association. And here's one of the arguments. Why vote yes on question 3? Balance will be restored by decreasing the number of full liquor licenses allowed by an individual or corporation from 9 to 7, while progressively increasing the number of beer and wine licenses from 9 to 18, minus any full liquor licenses owned by the corporation or individual. To improve public safety, self-checkout of alcohol beverages will be prohibited, and a fine for selling to a minor will be based on gross sales, not just for alcohol beverages. The initiative petition also helps the entire alcohol beverage industry by allowing for valid out-of-state IDs to be relied upon. Massachusetts is the only state in the U.S. that does not permit a retailer to reasonably rely on valid out-of-state IDs. So what did I tell you there? I told you I'd never heard of this before until I moved to Massachusetts. So that will help people that are out-of-state visitors and those that are out-of-state college students as well. Now, who opposed it? Food stores for consumer choice. Also, Cumberland Farms, that's a chain here. Total Wine, which is also a chain. Unions that opposed it: Massachusetts Food Association, New England Convenience Store and Energy Marketers Association, and Retailers Association of Massachusetts. And here's one of the arguments from John, who's the president of the Retailers Association of Massachusetts. If you're a package store, you're going to take a fine in order to stay open. But if you're a convenience store or a food store and all of a sudden you're going from being fined on your alcohol sales to your food and gasoline, you can't shut down and stop selling gasoline and food to your customers. You can't have that exorbitant fine. You just stop selling alcohol, and that was the intent. So again, this measure did not pass. There was campaign finance money spent to support and oppose this initiative. Only $12.50 was spent to oppose it. So that's really interesting. And of course, over $1 million was spent to support it. So interesting there with the alcohol laws. And the last one that I do want to cover, this one was upheld. It's the Massachusetts App-Based Drivers as Contractors and Labor Policy Initiative. This one's big if you are one of those drivers. A yes vote was to uphold House Bill 4805, which allows applicants who cannot verify citizenship or immigration status to submit certain forms of identification to obtain a driver's license or a motor vehicle registration. This was upheld. So this is not something that we would say, passed or failed. It was already in place and the vote was to keep it in place. But it was upheld by 53.93%. What does question 4 do? Question 4 was a veto referendum. It was repealed. It repealed the provision of state law that says no license of any type may be issued to a person who does not have a lawful presence in the United States. The proposed law prohibited registrars from inquiring about an applicant's citizenship or immigration status when applying for a driver's license or motor vehicle registration. It also authorized registrars to accept certain documents to verify the identity and the date of birth of an applicant. H 4805 required one of the documents to be either a valid, unexpired foreign passport or a valid, unexpired consular identification document. The bill required the second document to be a valid, unexpired driver's license from any U.S. state or territory, an original or certified copy of a birth certificate, a valid, unexpired foreign national identification card, a valid, unexpired foreign driver's license, or a marriage certificate or divorce decree issued by any state or territory of the United States. Any information or communication provided by an applicant to the Registrar of Motor Vehicles, including not providing proof of lawful presence, would not be considered public record, nor be disclosed by the registrar except as required by federal law. This law was designed to take effect on July 1st, 2023. So the idea to support this was for safer roads. Who supported it? Senate President Karen Spilka, State Representative Tricia Farley Bouvier, House Speaker Ronald Mariano, Attorney General Maura Healey, who, by the way, now Maura Healey is now our governor. So just keep in mind, last year when this was proposed, she was the Attorney General. Unions, SEIU Local 32B, and SEIU Massachusetts State Council. Organizations, ACLU of Massachusetts. What are some of the arguments? Unfortunately, collectively punishing all undocumented people in Massachusetts by taking away their ability to obtain a driver's license will only leave the door open for more fatalities, leaving Massachusetts less fair and secure. Who supported the no vote? That was Governor Charlie Baker, our former governor, Senate Representative Colleen Gary, State Representative Mark Lombardo. Candidates Cecilia Calabrese and Jeff Deal. Now, Jeff Deal ran against Elizabeth Warren for her first Senate race, and he also ran for governor this time around as well. He's a Trump Republican. He's lost every time. I don't know why this guy keeps running. But that is that. And also State Senator Dean Tran, who was a former official, also supported the no vote. The argument, I do not think that we should be rewarding people for being in the country illegally. I think the RMV is not equipped to properly vet people coming into the United States from over 100 different countries. And there was, as you can see, over $3 million spent to support it and over $200,000 to oppose it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Massachusetts. So, interesting. We will be moving on to other states as well. We've made our way to the beginning of the M's. We're getting there, guys. We're already in the M's. We are getting there. Going to go to some of the comments, and then we will move on to our next story. Okay. Whoever said no worries, it makes a person feel welcome, so it's nice. Oh, sorry, I was just catching up on some of the comments here. Betsy said racists and xenophobes got this BI approved. She's saying that to Roger Meadows. Yeah, it's I told you in some ways we're pretty progressive, and in other ways it's like sometimes it's like going backwards. So I don't know. That's Massachusetts for you, though. That is Massachusetts. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our next story. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and do me a favor and smash that like button. Go ahead and give it a hawk smash. That helps me out with the algo. And we're moving on to this story here about Mayor Michelle Wu. You guys know I've told you this before. There have been some things that she has done that I've spoken out about that I felt was just incredibly wrong. But I also said that if she does something that I feel is good, I'm going to talk about that as well. This is a step in the right direction. Do I think this goes as far as it should? No. But this is not something that Marty Walsh would have done. And this is not something that Mayor Menino would have done. So I do have to get her credit for that. Now, we've talked before about reparations and the need for reparations for African Americans that are descendants of slavery in this country. We've talked about it on a national level. We've also had people come onto the show and talk about what it would look like on a local level, right? So you heard about California's task force for reparations. Well, now Boston, this is actually happening. Boston now has a reparations task force. I heard talks of this and I was like, we'll see if it actually happens, but it looks like they have moved forward with this. So I will give Mayor Wu credit for this. Boston's reparation task force commences work to study lingering impacts of slavery and repair harm. Now, Mayor Michelle Wu announced the members of the 10-person force on Tuesday. And for those who are not aware, here's a picture here. This is Mayor Michelle Wu right here. And then here are some of the other people from the committee. Now, let's get into it. Now, this was at the Museum of African American History is where this discussion took place. And yes, there is an African American History Museum in Boston. I get these comments from people all the time that said there's no Black people here. Yes, there are. There are Black people in Boston. If you're coming here as a tourist, you may not see them because you are only going to the tourist areas. You have to venture out into other parts of the city. All right, let's skedoodle. So you can see here's the hearing here. Mayor Wu cemented the creation of the city's reparations task force on Tuesday with a promise to deliver a deep study of Boston's slavery history and present avenues for repairing its lingering impacts, as she announced the 10 members of the newly formed body. I want to highlight something here, Boston slavery history. Some people might be shocked to hear this, but yes, Boston also was complicit in slavery in this country. There was actually an announcement, actually not too long ago, that there were concerns because it has been discovered that Faneuil, which is what Faneuil Hall is named after, who that's named after, was also a slave owner. So for a lot of you who come to visit to Boston and you go to Faneuil Hall, it's one of the most visited spots in the United States, believe it or not. That includes Quincy Market. It's all in that area. Faneuil Hall. Faneuil was a slave owner. So there have been talks of renaming it. Now, again, like I said before, renaming a building doesn't do things or doesn't improve things for people who live in those Black communities. It doesn't. You're just renaming the building. Why not take some of the money from the city and reinvest in those neighborhoods? That's always my argument. But let's go on. That's right. Boston was not innocent here. They were also a part of that. Born out of legislation passed by the city council in December, the task force is charged with offering recommendations for the city based off a yet-to-be commissioned report of the legacy of slavery in Boston, once a port city in the transatlantic slave trade, and its continuing repercussions in fueling racial disparities. I also want to mention in reference to the transatlantic slave trade, for those who are not aware, Rhode Island was one of the largest states. I don't want to say largest states. Rhode Island was one of the top 3 states that participated in the transatlantic slave trade. A lot of people know about South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina. A lot of people know about North Carolina. They know about the states in the South, but you need to understand that even in the Northeast, Rhode Island was in the top 3. Pass that on to your friends. Going on, among the group's responsibilities will be to assess what actions we as a city have taken and consider what actions we can take moving forward to acknowledge truth, foster reconciliation, repair harm, and restore and strengthen communities. That's coming from Mayor Wu. Citing the move as part of a conversation spanning generations, Wu said members were selected to represent multiple generations of Bostonians. I think that's key, right? That's key because not everyone here is a part of that. They include, and she lists all the names here, Denelson Fanfan, Jeremiah E. Burke, Lemercy Frazier. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. I'm so sorry if I did not. George Chip Greenidge Jr., he's the founder and director of Greatest Minds. Carrie Greenidge, assistant professor of studies in race, colonialism, and diaspora at Tufts University. David Harris, past managing director of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice. Dorothea Jones, civic organizer and member of the Roxbury Strategic Master Plan Oversight Committee. Carrie Mays, UMass Boston student and youth leader with teen empowerment. Natisha Mills, program manager for Embrace Boston, and Damani Williams, 11th grader at Jeremiah E. Burke High School. Joseph D. Feaster Jr., an attorney, former president of the Boston branch of the NAACP and current member of the city's Black Men and Boys Commission, will serve as chair of the task force. Proponents of the initiative include City Councilors Julia Mejia and Tanya Fernandez Anderson. The lead sponsors of the initial ordinance say it is part of the needed and long overdue atonement for Black Bostonians who continue to feel lasting inequities rooted in the era of slavery. Let's talk about something really quick here. The Boston Globe did a study a couple of years ago about racism in Boston. During that study, or during their research, what they found is that when you look at net worth in Boston, did you know that Black Bostonians' net worth is $8? $8. White Bostonians have a net worth of over $250K. Now, some of you may wonder, how can that be? Well, you have to look at what net worth actually means. Net worth is what you own minus what you owe. So if you don't own anything, your net worth is going to be zero. If you don't own anything and you owe a lot of debt, your net worth is going to be in the negative. You see how this works? This is why if someone makes this argument to you and they say that, well, I'm Black and I make $100,000 a year. That's great. That's your income. That's not your net worth. You can make $100,000 a year, but if you don't own anything, your net worth is going to be in the toilet. And that matters. And so when we go back to something like General Sherman's promise, which was to give freed slaves 40 acres and a mule, of course, it wouldn't be a mule today, probably a car. But the 40 acres represents land, and land represents wealth. So if you didn't have homes to pass down, if you didn't have land to pass down, you did not establish generational wealth. This is part of the reason why African Americans are more likely to have more debt, especially student loan debt. We're more likely to be first generation college students. I was one of them, which means we most likely will have to take out student loans. And then there's the income disparity that comes along with this as well. But net worth actually matters, people. And if you don't have net worth, that can really hold you back. You have nothing to pass down to the generations coming after you. Wu, speaking at the historic African Meeting House in Beacon Hill, acknowledged slave owning was etched into Boston's earliest chapter, dating to at least 1631. And even after Massachusetts became the first state to abolish slavery in the late 18th century, Bostonians continued to reap financial benefits from the system. Though the city boasts a proud 19th century history as a bastion of abolitionism, the task force ordinance highlights how, following the emancipation of slaves in 1865, The city established a political economy which limited opportunity, access, economic, and political inclusion for Black residents. In other words, let's go ahead and throw that word out there. You have to remember redlining. You have to remember all the other laws that were put in place that prevented Black people from getting their foot in the door to home ownership. That's key. Racial inequities, Wu said Tuesday, remain present today, evidenced by gaps in wealth, home ownership, education, and healthcare between communities of color and their white counterparts. The forming of this reparations task force is an important step in the ongoing process of bringing justice to the Black community of Boston. This is coming from Fernandez Anderson. This is so both for the historical legacies of anti-Black racism going back to the enslavement of kidnapped Africans, to the current manifestations of structural and systemic white supremacy that are embedded and entrenched within the political and economic status quo. Let's talk about some of the systemic issues here as well. One thing I noticed when I moved here, like I came here for grad school, but and I'm still here, but one of the things that I did notice is that it was kind of weird to me that if you look at the city of Boston, and let's go a little bit further out, let's look at Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville. It was a little bit weird to me that most of the colleges are private. If you look at Boston, for example, all of the colleges in Boston are private universities with the exception of UMass Boston. And UMass Boston was known as a commuter school, right? So they didn't have dorms. Why is that? If you look at a lot of the Black residents in Boston, how many of them can afford to go to these private universities? How many of them can afford to go to Harvard? How many of them can afford to go to MIT? How many of them can afford to go to Boston University, to go to Boston College? We can keep going. This list goes on. Simmons is also private. Wentworth is also private. Why? Who came up with that rule? It is the weirdest thing. I never, that's right, a kid. Why is that, Sabby? That's the weirdest thing. I never experienced that before. Now you can go to the University of Massachusetts, but that's in Amherst. That's not even near Boston. But when it comes to the city itself, it is actually disappointing and quite frustrating that there's only one public university that didn't have dorms. Now, from what I understand, I think they were trying to change that at UMass Boston. I thought they were trying to like create dorms there, but I don't know. It's very strange to me. Very strange. But let's go back into the article. But that's one of the systemic things, one of the problems that you have here. It's like, what are you supposed to do if that's what's available to you? There's Bunker Hill Community College, but Bunker Hill Community College has a lot of issues, not just with the academics that needs to be improved, but also the administration. Working there is horrible from what I've heard from people. I've talked to people who have worked there. I heard it's absolute disaster. So something has to change in reference to that. When you look at home ownership, most Black people cannot afford to buy a house in Boston or right outside of Boston. You just can't. It's too expensive. Like buying a house in Boston, like almost $1 million. The condos that they built down the street from me in Somerville, they were charging $800,000 for a condo in Somerville, which a couple years ago, people used to call Slummerville. They were said that's the place you don't go to. Gentrification changed that. So there are a lot of things that are in place that really make it difficult. Public transportation. If you go into a lot of the Black neighborhoods, there isn't a subway stop. There's certain parts of Roxbury you live in, there's no subway stop. So then it's like you have to have a car. Those are some of the inequity. Those are some of the inequities that people have to deal with here. living in a city like Boston. There's also, and this has improved over time, but I did notice when I moved here that Boston is deeply, deeply segregated, not by law, but deeply segregated, and to the point where there were Black neighborhoods, white neighborhoods. And yes, you have that all across the United States. But what I noticed about Boston is that it's definitely more noticeable here. You notice it right off the bat, right off the bat. So that's right. Edward says by design. Exactly. Exactly. So I think that, we know these are problems here and something needs to be done. Something needs to be fixed. Like they need to find some type of program to help Black people in Boston be able to buy homes. That's another thing. It's just so expensive and it's gotten worse over the years. Let's go on. The announcement came a day after Boston got an even fuller picture of its relationship to slavery in America. A new report released Monday, spearheaded by a Harvard doctoral student, outlines how widespread slavery was in colonial Boston and includes evidence showing at least 58 Africans and indigenous people were enslaved by white parishioners of the First Church in Roxbury between 1631 and 1775. While Boston joins other communities around the nation now considering action on reparations, approaches have varied from city to city. The task force ordinance states the group will make recommendations in part around how Boston can eliminate policies that harm Black residents. Yeah, this shouldn't even be, this is the thing. Like in 2023, eliminate policies that harm Black residents. Why do you even still have those policies in place in 2023 to begin with? Let's go on. The body will also recommend how the city can issue a formal apology to the people of Boston for the perpetration of gross human rights violations and crimes against humanity on African slaves and their descendants. The process is expected to take 18 months. We are looking forward to determining recommendations for how we reckon with Boston's past while charting a path forward for Black people whose ancestors labored without compensation and who were promised the 40 acres and a mule they never received. I know, President Jesus, a formal apology, how much is that worse? I totally hear you. Like, I don't think that's really what a lot of people are looking for. I can say this to Mayor Wu. I think people are looking for you to change the systemic issues. There's a lot of structural racism in Boston. People are looking for that to change. And also, people are looking for you to give them a check. People are looking for you to give them the amount that they would be owed today to close the racial wealth gap here. You're not going to close the racial wealth gap by canceling student loan debt, because most Black people don't have student loans, because most Black people don't have, haven't been to college. So you're going to have to do something. The apology is not that's right, Terry. Terry says, no. Taquish says, give us a check like you do Ukraine. Ouch. Taquish coming with the blows. Coming with the blows. Oh my gosh. Terry says, U.S. Black folks are in the hood. Yeah, or us Black folks are in the hood. Yeah, like when people say that there's no Black people here, that's not true. If you're coming here as a tourist, you're not going to the areas where you are going to see most of the Black people. Screen Art says the only acceptable reparations must include the end of a system that enslaves people. Capitalism must go. Well said. Well said. But there are things that I like about Boston, but just because there are things that I like about it, it doesn't mean that we don't have room for improvement, and we do have room for improvement. And I think that these are things I noticed right off the bat Like when I came here for grad school, these are things I noticed week one. And I was like, what the hell is this? You know, I mean, coming from states like North Carolina, South Carolina, even when I lived in Germany, having lived in places like Maryland, Virginia, you notice a type of segregation here in Boston that is deeply, deeply entrenched. And you can tell it just goes back decades. You can tell. Oh, Fat Mentive says, I don't want an apology. I want money and a choice. Cut the check, which gives me a choice. Yes. Well, I sincerely hope this task force, like I said, it's a start. Nobody else wanted to do it. Marty Walsh wasn't willing to do it. Mayor Menino wasn't willing to do it. So I'll give Michelle Wu props for that. It's a start, but I sincerely hope this task force is going to come up with some type of monetary compensation. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. I'm sorry, but you need to fix that issue. Okie doke. Let me check. I want to check Rockfin really quick and see if there's comments on there. And then I want to go ahead and get to our next story. So, which should be pretty interesting as well. And I would ask all of you, like, if you have doubts about reparations, or if you're doubting like the state process, I do want you to know, just keep in mind that this is not supposed to be the end goal. The end goal is to implement it on a national level. But it seems like there are certain states and cities that are trying to handle their own business and see how they can help people in their state and not wait for some type of deal to be made on the national level. And I get that too, but I just hope they give people what they're owed and keep it real and fix these damn schools. You guys know how I feel about the schools. Fix the damn schools. Okay. Shout out to Dave Burt. Thank you so much for the $2 tips on Rockfin. Thank you so much for that. All right. And shout out to Terry Hinton. Thank you for the super chat. Love your work, Sabby. Thank you so much. Thank you. We are moving on. Now, we covered the State of the Union address in real time the other night. As you can imagine, there have been questions to other politicians in DC about what they thought about Joe Biden's speech and how he's doing as a president. Now, there are two people that I want to highlight tonight that we're going to discuss. One is Pramila Jayapal, and the other one is AOC. And yes, they were asked about this, about the State of the Union address. And I'm calling this the Biden defenders because they're making a lot of excuses for Joe Biden. They're heavily defending Joe Biden, even though if you watch that stream with me live in real time, you saw there were a number of lies told by Joe Biden. Does Pramila Jayapal and AOC call that out? Let's dive in. We're going to start with Pramila's interview. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Case is always on the money, doing the damn thing. Let's listen to what Pramila Jayapal said to CNN about Joe Biden's performance for the State of the Union. Let's dive in.
Congressman Pramila Jayapal. She is a Democrat from Washington. She's a member of the House Judiciary Committee. Congresswoman, good to have you. Let me start here with a couple of numbers here. This is from the ABC News Washington Post poll over the weekend. 6 in 10, more than 6 in 10 Americans say the president has accomplished very little or nothing, close to nothing in his first 2 years. What does he have to do tonight to potentially convince those 6 out of 10?
Well,
Pause. I just want to highlight those numbers. 62% of Americans. The question is, what has Biden accomplished during his time in office? 62% of Americans said not much, little, or nothing. 36% said great deal / good amount. Ladies and gentlemen, 62%. And I wasn't polled, so don't look at me. I wasn't. They didn't contact me. Let's see how she tries to run cover for this one.
Nothing in his first 2 years. What does he have to do tonight to potentially convince those 6 out of 10?
Well, Victor, it's great to be with you. I think people just need to hear from the president. They need to hear him brag about the tremendous accomplishments and the fact that he has, under just this last 2 years, created almost 11 million new jobs, brought unemployment down in this country to the lowest level in over half a century.
Pause. When they explain to you that Joe Biden has decreased unemployment, the most unemployment in history, they always leave out the fact that he actually removed people from unemployment. Sorry, I think that piece is important to mention, that Joe Biden kicked people off of unemployment. So of course, your unemployment numbers are going to be historically low when you've kicked all those people off. That happened on Labor Day, by the way. She leaves that out. Ro Khanna leaves that out. Everyone that mentions this statement, they leave that out. 2, Amazon, Google, Facebook. Those are just the few companies that have announced that they are laying off thousands of people. And I don't mean 2,000. We're going double digits here. 10,000 people, 11,000 people, all these companies laying employees off, and they continue to lie about the unemployment rate. They continue to lie about the economy as if we don't have 2 eyes and ears. And we see these announcements being made by these companies as if we don't know any better. For Americans who can't afford the groceries at the grocery store right now, do you think the economy is working out well for them? For the people who worked at those companies that I just mentioned, and those are only a few, that just lost their job, do you think this economy is working out well for them? They don't even mention it. They don't even mention it at all.
Building things in America again. Now, some of these things haven't happened across the country yet because legislation takes a while to actually show up in districts, but
legislation takes a while when you want it to take a while, because let's remember how fast they moved on legislation in reference to the railroad workers asking for paid sick days. They moved very quickly on that. They move very quickly on legislation to give billions of dollars to Ukraine. Let's all remember that. So the legislation moves fast when they want it to. The legislation seems to move slow when you're doing something for the American people.
You know, I do know that seniors across the country are already feeling the effects of having $35 cap on insulin. These are all the things that I think the president will talk about tonight, and he will make sure that people understand this is a new era where this Democratic Party, this president, care about working people, not about the wealthiest corporations and individuals that got big tax breaks under Donald Trump, but
you mean some of the same tax breaks that Joe Biden continued? See, this is why I can't interview these people. I can't interview these people. I can't. Like when I interviewed Ro Khanna, I thought I was going to just pull out my hair, because they are knowingly lying to you. They are knowingly gaslighting the American people. Creative Experiments just said Disney just announced 7,000 layoffs. This is Joe Biden's economy.
Actually about working people, raising taxes on the wealthiest in order to fund things that really make life better for people every day.
So we understand that some of the plans that have been signed into law, people are not feeling the effects of those yet. But let me give you one more number. 41% of the people in this poll said that they're actually financially worse off than they were at the start of this administration. This is the highest number in the 37-year history of this poll, higher than at the worst point of the Great Recession.
What did I tell you guys? Robert also mentioned Boeing is laying off over 2,000 people. What have I been saying? When people ask me this question, are you better off financially now? Aren't you better off financially now than you were under Trump? No, I'm not. And I'm sorry. Some people don't want to hear this because you hate Trump so much. I don't like Trump either. But financially, I am not better off now. And it's not just me. Look at what the American people are saying. Finally better off now, or when Biden entered office. Only 16% said better off. Only 16%. And those are probably people who are already financially pretty stable. 41% said not as well off. 42% said about the same. JB says, no, I'm not. No. I mean, people have to understand that, listen, I wasn't paying a lot of money for groceries 2 years ago. I wasn't paying all this money for gas 2 years ago. Like, everything is higher now. Not to mention, some of these companies aren't even giving employees raises to adjust for the inflation. Let's see how she spends it.
So this is not so much a messaging problem. People are feeling worse financially.
Yeah, but her and Rokana continue to say that we have to tell the story better. We have to get the message across. It's not about a message. He's right about this. It's not a messaging problem. It's called, you go online and you look at your bank account problem. You open your wallet and you look at your wallet problem. That's what it's called. So you can spin the message however you want. If people can see that financially they are hurting when they look at their bank account, the message that you give them is not going to resonate with them. Let's go on.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's true that we are coming out of one of the worst economic crises in the history of this country. COVID combined with the economic crisis, that was a tremendous amount of pain that people went through under the last administration, under the last president. This president is the president that actually got shots in arms, that kept small businesses going. I don't expect that people will feel like everything is great, because the reality.
Let's go back here, because I just caught her in a lie. I didn't notice this the first time I listened to it, but listen to what she said here.
Coming out of one of the worst economic crises in the history of this country. COVID combined with the economic crisis, that was a tremendous amount of pain that people went through under the last administration, under the last president. This president is the president that actually got shots in arms, that kept small businesses going. I don't expect that people will feel like everything is great, because the reality is we've got a lot more work to do.
Let's talk about the small businesses here. I want to remind you, because somehow some people seem to have amnesia. But for those of us that live in states that shut down during the pandemic, that was the governor's choice. My governor made the decision to shut down Massachusetts. And before anyone comes at me and says, well, those were those Democrat governors, my governor was a Republican. Okay. The governors made those choices. Trump didn't make that choice. He left it up to the states. So there's that. And then two, where she says, like, he saved these small businesses. That's interesting, because a lot of the small businesses in the Boston area closed down for good. They closed permanently. You're talking about those PPE loans that some people didn't even get? Not to mention, they didn't go to some of the people they were supposed to go to. Some people didn't get them at all that were supposed to get those. So I'm sorry, but come here to Boston, take a walk with me, and I'll show you all the businesses, all the small businesses that closed indefinitely. Let's go on.
And Victor, I think you're going to hear the president tonight talk about the biggest inflationary costs that families are facing, things like childcare and housing. Those are the things that are still to do in the president's agenda that he laid out that we got.
How are you going to leave out food? How are you going to leave out childcare and housing? Are you seriously going to sit here and pretend like the grocery store prices aren't high? How do you leave out food? Newsflash, not everyone has kids, so not all of us have to pay for childcare, but all of us need to eat. Okay. And you don't remember to mention food.
Very close to accomplishing last session, but that we are going to get done once we have majorities again. So I think you'll hear, of course, what we've done, but absolutely recognizing that Americans are still feeling pain and that this president is going to use executive action, things like raising the overtime threshold to give workers, 30 million workers across the country.
Then why hasn't he done it yet? If he can do this by executive action, why wait and do it later instead of having already done the first half?
Excellent question. You know what? I'm going to give you your props. I am going to give you your props for that one. If he can do it by executive order, why not just do it now? Look at the expression on her face, though. Oh, okay.
Well, I think he's already done a lot by executive action. As you know, he raised, federal contractors' minimum wages to $15.
This is a talking point. See, this is a strategy that they use. So she doesn't really have to answer the question. And a lot of politicians do this. What they'll do is that they'll tell you what that person did in the past so that they don't have to answer for what they're not doing in the present. Rokana does this. Pramila Jayapal does it. AOC does it. A lot of politicians do this so that they don't have to admit that Joe Biden isn't doing what he should be doing in the present. So notice she's not answering the question.
Fix the ACA glitch to get millions more health care. There's more health care, more Americans covered under the Affordable Care Act than ever before. So he has been doing that. He will continue to do that. But I think the key message here, Victor, is this is a president who understands how to get things done. This is a Democratic Party that has delivered a lot for people. We have a lot more to do, and we will take that opportunity over the next 2 years and hopefully when we get the majorities back again in 2024.
Did not answer the question. He asked you, why is he not doing those things that need to be done? Why is he not doing it by executive order right now? She didn't answer the question.
Foreign policy now. The White House says do not expect the president to speak specifically about the Chinese spy drone. We've been calling it a balloon. Calling it a balloon makes it sound quaint. This spy drone that traveled across the country. Should he? He'll talk about China, talk about foreign policy and the policy toward China, but should he talk specifically about what we watched traverse the country?
I don't think he needs to. I think he's already spoken about this. I think he did what he needed to do, which was prioritize the safety of the American people first and foremost, and then shoot it down so that he could collect, so that this administration could collect whatever equipment was on that drone and assess, what exactly happened here. But I think he handled it the right way. This is the moment to talk about his big vision about.
Notice the framing. Notice the framing. Notice how they were calling it balloon. They were calling it a weather balloon, and now he's using it's a drone. This is how they get the American people riled up. This is how they instill fear in the American people. Vocabulary is key. The words that you use actually do matter. Some people don't realize this, but it actually does. There's a big difference from saying balloon and saying drone.
All of the ways in which he's built diplomatic relations across the world in a way that, frankly, the last president destroyed. It was on this president to build back the credibility of the United States on the global stage. And Victor, I think he's done that.
Congress.
I don't think he has. I think he's made things worse, just getting us more involved in other conflicts that honestly, we don't really need to be involved in. I'm going to hit some of these comments, and then I'm going to show you what AOC said in response to the State of the Union address. Thank you for the super chat, radical leftist extremists. Artificial intelligence is about to steal tens of millions of jobs. Mark my words, California will look like Cleveland. This is something that Andrew Yang has been warning people about. You know, Andrew Yang came on here and we did not agree on a lot in reference to policy. But one of the things that where we do agree is about automation, and it is a problem, and it's happening faster than people may realize. Having worked at MIT, haven't been around like some of the technology, which this is not secret. These are things that have already been published. Just put that out there. It's coming faster than you think. They have robots that can hunt down people. They got robots that can do the work for you. So I think people need to pay close attention to that. Thank you for the super chat, Coca-Cola. Thank you for what you do. I learned so much from you and your guests. Thank you so much for that. At Kids says, Sabby, please consider in 2021 per Money Watch, Biden's stimulus plan offers less help for small businesses. There you go. And the Oracle says she's already posturing for 2024, trying to segue away from the present. Yeah. Anything to prevent you from looking at things the way that it is, or for what it really is. What happened here? Oh, let me bring up the AOC one. Case has a lot of clips. I think that Case, you be putting up a lot of clips, bud. I think I put the wrong link. Give me just a second. That was about climate change, Jai Paul. Not more Rokana. Let me see. Make sure I went to the right one. Just give me a second, guys. I'm just looking up that, which I thought I had that here and somehow. Oh no, not Jim Clyburn. Okay, I know I went too far if I see that. Bring that back. Go ahead and hit that like button, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so. That will push me up into the algorithm. You guys know why I'm looking for this. You know what song I heard today? Have you ever heard this song by this group called the Ting Tings? The song is called That's Not My Name. I heard that song earlier today. I love that song, by the way. And I'm not here to get it stuck in your head or anything. Or maybe I am. All right, I found it. That's not my name. That's not my name. They call me Stacey.
Described it as the most
All right. Here is AOC's response in reference to the State of the Union address and how she thought Biden did. So this interview is with Rachel Maddow. So here we go.
Our take from our studio view of the president's speech tonight was that it was unusually interactive. Lawrence O'Donnell used the word combative, described it as the most combative State of the Union speech that he'd ever seen. That was our impression from here. What was your impression in the room, and what did you make of the president's remarks?
Absolutely. I may not have served as many terms or have as much experience as other members, but this is my, fourth or fifth now, and I have never seen a State of the Union that was so disrupted by members of either party. Even under President Donald Trump, we saw nowhere near the level of jeering, interruption, etc., that we saw by some of, I want to say the extreme elements of the Republican Party, but they are now being embraced and uplifted as the center of the Republican Party. It's really shocking. Even the things that the overall Republican Party refused to stand for, paying public school teachers, public health policy, basic education policy, raising the wage for some of our lowest paid workers in the United States.
You know what's really interesting? You can tell she's just pulling things out of her ass because, she's just saying things that a lot of people already know, obviously, about the right. She's just pulling words like it's just word salad for her. Some of the things that she mentioned, I want to remind people that her Democrat colleagues also oppose. Let's remember it was 7 Democrats that voted against the $15 minimum wage. Let's remember that the Democratic Party does not want Medicare for all, so much to the point that people like AOC who ran on it don't even talk about Medicare for all anymore. So let's stop pretending that the Democratic Party under Joe Biden is like this far left, radical, let's get out there and help the workers type of party. How can you talk about wages and workers, AOC, when you were a strike breaker, when you voted against the railroad workers having paid sick days, when you voted against the railroad workers being able to go on strike? How can you even come out here and say that and make it seem like it's just something that the right is against when you yourself voted against very legislation to give the railroad workers the right to go on strike? Actress of the Year award goes to her.
You know, I mean, this should be really basic stuff, sky is blue kind of stuff. And the Republican Party, I think, really showed the country who they are tonight, that they have been taken over and that this isn't some right wing. This is the ethos of the modern Republican Party.
Weren't you supposed to take over the Democratic Party? Wasn't AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, wasn't the squad sent there to take over the Democratic Party? Guys, please pay close attention to the rhetoric that is being used. She just told you these far-right politicians have seemed to taken over the Republican Party. And she says it, the takeover part, in a negative way, which is exactly what she was supposed to do with the Democratic Party. So who is AOC really? Who are they really? She is letting you know, if people don't see it, still don't see it, I hope you see it now. She's letting you know that she is never going to be one of those people that tries to take over the Democratic Party or goes against Democrat leadership. She's letting you know with her own words.
We did see the president focus on economic issues and sort of bread and butter issues and working families, middle-class families, practical issues throughout almost the duration of his speech. He talked a little bit about Ukraine. He talked a little bit about the Roe versus Wade decision for a little bit. He spent considerable time on police violence and trying to get some sort of police reform. But we really saw him talk about nuts and bolts stuff, kitchen table stuff, wages, dignity of work, jobs, healthcare costs, access to healthcare. I have to imagine that in your district, given its profound diversity, both ethnic and economic diversity, that has to be I'm guessing that has to be welcome, just in terms of that being such a large focus of the president's remarks.
Yeah.
Ask the people in her district how she treats them. Ask the people in her district how she responds to them still struggling financially under these high prices. Ask. I've played the videos on here where she's been interrupted at these town halls by people who live in her very district, the people who some of them actually canvass for her and phone bank for her. She doesn't care about the people in her district. She's in now. She's made friends with the right people and she's rubbed elbows with the right people to continue her career as a politician in the Democratic Party.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I do think that the forcefulness of some of the language that he used, calling out Big Pharma by name, really naming these caps that we have passed on the price of insulin, on out-of-pocket costs, it is powerful. And this is some of the most animating issues that touch the material reality.
I'm sorry. This piece right here.
Forcefulness of some of the language that he used, calling out Big Pharma by name.
Calling out Big Pharma. If you watch the State of the Union address with me, don't you remember when we pointed out that he said to the Republicans, don't worry, Big Pharma is going to be okay. Big Pharma is still going to be okay. See, I didn't take that the way that AOC took it. The way I took that was him letting them know that Big Pharma is still going to be able to make a profit, that Big Pharma is still going to exist. She's trying to spin it. If it was really as forceful as she says it is, then why isn't Joe Biden trying to advocate for Medicare for all? Why is he still saying that he would veto it if it came across his desk? Why are we giving these little incremental wins and they're only for a select amount of people? For example, the price cap on insulin, $35. Listen, if you're not a senior on Medicare, that doesn't apply to you. Why are you only giving it to those people when a lot of people in this country, what about kids who are born with diabetes? What are they supposed to do? What about the parents who are working class that has a child that is diabetic and they still have to ration their insulin? Why are you only giving that to people who are 65 and up that are on Medicare? There's nothing radical about that, AOC. There's nothing radical about that when you have a child poverty rate in this country that continues to increase. And I don't want to hear they got rid of half the kids. They kicked half the kids off of poverty. You still have over 50% that is still living in poverty. And you ended the child tax credit early. So those people, a lot of those kids are right back where they started.
Really naming these caps that we have passed on the price of insulin, on out-of-pocket costs, it is powerful. And this is some of the most animating issues that touch the material reality of everyday Americans. I think he did a good job of that while also not letting off corporate greed. As you know, he called out the profit margins of big oil. I mean, I think that it was definitely...
He supports fracking, AOC. He's still supporting fracking. He's still supporting some of the oil projects that's happening off the coast of Texas. So you either didn't do your research or you're lying on purpose.
Impactful, and it was surprising, I think, even to some of us, compared to some of his past State of the Unions.
Let me ask you about
compared to some of his past State of the Unions. There was only one other one. What are you, she throws out the same, pay attention to the words that she uses. A lot of times you'll hear her say impactful. Pay attention to that. She uses buzzwords to make it sound like she knows what she's talking about. But a lot of times, if you pay attention to AOC, she does not know what she's talking about. She just throws in these filler words to make it seem like she does.
Something I just referenced a moment ago, but let me just ask you in detail about what you thought about the president's lengthy and I thought quite empathetic remarks about police violence. He talked about how members of law enforcement are risking their lives when they put on the shield and that they deserve to come home just like the communities they protect. But community members deserve to come home too, and there have been too many people killed and it's not getting better fast enough. And he spent a lot of time engaging with Tyree Nichols' parents who were there in the gallery watching. And we know so many other family members of people who've been killed by police were there tonight in the room to pay witness. What do you make of the president's remarks and about what he's substantively proposing?
You know, I was surprised by the president's remarks and his focus on reform, focus on justice, and really his focus on centering the families that have been so deeply impacted by police violence and police brutality.
Why were you surprised by that when he invited George Floyd's family to come to the White House? This is not the first time he's focused on those families before. Focusing on the families and mentioning the issues that we already know exist doesn't solve the problem. When you are continuing to fund the police, you're complicit with a part of the problem. When you're continuing not to take apart these for-profit prisons, you are continuing the problem. When you participated in writing the crime bill, you participated in this problem. You have the authority. There are things that you can do by executive order to put the balance in place, and he is choosing not to do that. So I'm sorry, but when you appear on stage and you already point out that there's police violence and police brutality and the training and we need reform, these things are not new. It's nothing I haven't heard before. And anyone who's any type of abolitionist has heard these statements before as well. We don't need you to come to us and continue to tell us what the damn problem is. We know what the problem is. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to fix it. And you do not fix it by giving the police more money.
And really centering this discussion around reform. If you contrast that with his speech just a year ago, where, you know, this two-dimensional frame of fund or defund, and it was, we're going to fund the police. This is a very different conversation, and one that advocates have been asking for a.
It's not a different conversation. It's not a different conversation. Last year, he also said that we need to pass the George Floyd Policing Act. See, I remember all of this. He said we need to pass the George Floyd Policing Act, which also gives more money to the police. So anyone who is advocating for this, they need to fully understand, if they have not looked at the bill, the George Floyd Policing Act also gives more money to the police. Why else would he support it? In reference to police reform, he mentioned that last year as well. This is not a new thing that he's mentioning. AOC is trying to make it seem like he never mentioned this before. That is a lie. You can say both. And that's what he's doing. He's talking out both sides of his mouth. He's saying you need police reform, but he's also saying you need to fund the police in order to get that reform. And that's the piece that AOC is leaving out.
Long time, see what is happening on the ground, see and acknowledge the reality that our communities are experiencing, and that this is a problem that has gone unaddressed for far too long. And so for him to stand up there, to name, you know, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which in and of itself, advocates already believe that it doesn't really go far enough to address the core underlying issues. But still, for him to name this legislation, it's a long way from.
No, it is not a long way, AOC. As I just told you guys, he mentioned this last year. I don't see how the American people fall for this, man. I don't see how people fall for this garbage.
Just a year ago, where it was really just about how much more money can we pile into these local departments in order to fix this issue.
It was not just about that. See, what AOC is trying to do, why do you guys think they're interviewing the so-called progressives? Why do you think they're interviewing them? Because what they're trying to do, they're trying to convince you, the American people, that Joe Biden is actually moving further to the left, so that you'll vote for him in 2024. Because why, if someone like Marianne Williamson is going to challenge Joe Biden, or possibly maybe Anina Turner, anybody trying to primary challenge Joe Biden, if the progressives have already convinced you that Joe Biden is moving further to the left, why would you then even want to support the person primary challenging him? You see how this works? They're all a part of it. And I can guarantee and I can bet you, I already gave my opinion about Marianne running for president. I won't support anyone running through the two-party system, but I can guarantee and bet you none of those squad members will support a progressive primary challenging Joe Biden. I bet you, damn well bet you, they'll back Joe Biden.
I also think it's an acknowledgement of the fact that this isn't really connected to funding much at all in terms of how we actually lower these instances of horrific violence in communities. And so I thought it was encouraging. I know myself, and
it is connected to funding, AOC. It is definitely connected to funding. You're lying. You're bold-faced lying to people.
some other members were kind of waiting for the shoe to drop. We felt like there was kind of this wind up and that there was going to be a but. And I think we were very relieved and surprised that there was no but, that there was just an acknowledgement that this is actually a problem. And we have not really heard a president do that in such a straightforward way in a long time, if ever, in modern politics.
Don't trust this woman. Like, seriously, do not trust this woman. She really playing people. Really playing people.
It's a really astute point, particularly talking about the distance that President Biden himself has come on this issue, perhaps in his own personal understanding, but also in the way he's willing to talk about it. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here, New York Democrat.
I feel like I'm the only one that actually listened to what he said last year. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Because I definitely remember him making those same comments. He was trying to say both. He was saying you needed reform. He was saying pass the George Floyd Policing Act, but he was also saying fund the police. He was saying both at the same time. So he don't look bad to the police, but he don't look bad to Black communities. And using the victims' family members as props. Such a joke. Such a joke. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat at Kid. Propaganda for the balloon is conditioning U.S. population to support war against China, similar to WOMDs in Iraq. That's right. That's right. Debo says she's now one of the worst politicians, swindled millions of working Americans out of their hard-earned money, and has never delivered on anything. A fraud. She is. But like I said, she checked off all the boxes. Who can we pick that will actually have a significant chance of winning, that the American people will actually, believe, these young people will believe that they are a progressive person. And she checked off all the boxes. We are moving on to this next story here, and this is going to be the topic for the call-in discussion tonight. If you have not seen, Jimmy Dore, yes, has been smeared again. And I want to talk about this because I think there's something that needs to be explained, and I think there's something that needs to be said about NDAs. But I also want you to understand the overall goal here of this article, because it's not just about one particular person per se. Let's dive in. Now, this article was written by Walker Bragman. He's a liberal. It's just like he supports the Democratic Party. So it's important that you understand that. So it says Jimmy Dore's very pro-employer work contracts. So let's go ahead and get into this. It's just really interesting to me that people would even waste their time. You're wasting your time writing an entire article about a podcaster the majority of Americans don't even know. Do people not understand this? Let me make it very clear. The majority of Americans have no idea who Jimmy Dore is. Yes, he has over 1 million subscribers, but the majority of Americans don't even watch independent media. You writing this article, Walker, you're actually giving Jimmy more exposure. This is going to make more people don't understand this. Bad press sometimes is good press. When you waste your time writing these articles about people, like I said, the majority of Americans don't know, you're actually giving them more attention and more exposure. That's just going to increase his numbers. So I don't know what it is you're trying to do, but I think I have an idea. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because the text, and that's too big. And there we go. Popular YouTube personality and comedian Jimmy Dore, who presents himself as a champion of labor in the working class, had contractors sign a harsh labor agreement in the summer of 2020, documents obtained by important contacts reveal. So the harsh labor agreement he's referring to, it's an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, which is actually pretty standard in media. That's not uncommon. Let's go on. These people have nothing else better to do. I swear to God. The 57-year-old Dore originally rose to national prominence within the progressive circles due to his decade-long affiliation with the Young Turks YouTube channel. Yeah, why aren't you writing articles about Cenk Uygur, Walker? There, he became known as one of the loudest, most passionate proponents of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. However, his online star has risen since striking out on his own in 2019. Today, he boasts more than 1 million YouTube subscribers and over 433,000 Twitter followers. He has appeared on cable news and the podcast of Joe Rogan and Russell Brand. In 2020, Dore was reportedly able to purchase a 1.9 million, 2,800 square foot compound in LA, San Fernando Valley. You know, it's really interesting. People always bring up this thing about Jimmy Dore's house. Why aren't they writing articles about all the other podcasters who are millionaires? Why aren't they talking about their homes? Why aren't they talking about podcasters who have maids, nannies, $1 million homes? Why aren't they talking about them? Because those podcasters still support the Democratic Party. Those podcasters aren't telling you to leave the two-party system. Those podcasters, they may criticize the Democratic Party somewhat, but they still believe that you can work with the Democratic Party by having progressives go into the Democratic Party. Just keep this in mind, because the way they word this, they will have you believe he's the only one no, he's not. There's others who are millionaires in this space. I sure as hell ain't one of them. Much of Dore's audience growth had occurred since the latter half of 2021, according to YouTube analytics Social Blade, coinciding with the comedian's full-bore embrace of conspiracy theories. Here we go. For example, Dore has suggested that the pandemic is an excuse for economic elites to engineer greater social control, that the jab are a big pharma scam and actually increase susceptibility to the virus, that the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband was a homosexual lover's quarrel, that federal law enforcement helped facilitate the I can't say that part. Let's go down to this part. The core of Dore appeal, however, stems from his reputation as a bare knuckles populist. He's a truth-telling everyman willing to hold all sides accountable on behalf of workers, especially Democrats. With a learn-as-you-go approach to the news, the YouTuber has spent years raging against the machine, bemoaning the ills of sellout politicians, journalists, corporations, and capitalism. Now, let's get down to the piece about the NDA. Documents obtained by important contacts reveal that labor is not necessarily winning at Dore's own show. An independent contractor agreement, which was used by Dore's production company for Dore Productions in the summer of 2020, contains several harsh provisions that disadvantage workers, including forced arbitration. Former friends and colleagues of Dore's told important contacts that the agreement was not out of character for the comedian. So first and foremost, this is something that apparently happened in 2020. I don't know if this is still continuing now or not, but here we are 2023, and you need to ask yourself this question as also, why are these former employers all of a sudden coming forward now? Here it is, 2023. Why are they all of a sudden coming forward now? What's right around the corner? The 2024 presidential election. Why didn't they come forward before Jimmy Dore had 1 million subs? That just happened last year, by the way. Why did they come forward before then? Things to think about. Very pro-employer. The agreement from 4DP includes clauses that are very protective of the company and Dore, legal experts told Important Context. The document contains a thorough 9-part, 3-page long confidentiality section, effectively prohibiting contractors from discussing anything they learned about Dore, his wife, or their collaborators on the job, including details about their business, personal lives, finances, investments, and more. Okay. Highlight this part right here. Why would you want someone who is a contractor? Remember, contractors are not permanent employees. Okay. Keep that in mind. But why would you want your employee to tell people information about your personal life? Why would you want your employee to release information about your finances, your investments, etc.? Why would you want them to tell that information? I think something that is important for people to understand is that Jimmy Dore is not just a YouTube host, a political commentator. He's also a comedian. So I wouldn't be surprised if other comedians, maybe someone like a Joe Rogan or Dave Chappelle, I wouldn't be surprised if they had this kind of clause as well. So people have to remember that. Let's go on. Okay, so 6.4, contractor acknowledges and agrees that the privacy of Steph Zamorano and James Dore, their family members and individuals with whom they collaborate, are highly valued, and that all efforts are made to maintain confidentiality with respect to all information and other material of every kind concerning them. Accordingly, contractor agrees that he, she, it, they shall not at any time use or disclose directly or indirectly any information in any way relating to Steph or Jimmy, their family members, or any individuals with whom they collaborate, including but not limited to any information concerning their business, personal life. Okay, we read that part. So that's the screenshot of that. The agreement is a stark departure from Dore's public commentary. In the past, Dore criticized former President Trump's use of confidentiality agreements with volunteers, calling them very right-wingy. If those people want to do that, you are a volunteer, and you want to do that again, you're just a moron. If you want to play in traffic, I guess I can't stop you either. Like, go ahead. The consequences for workers who breach Dore's confidentiality section or another extensive section requiring contractors to sign away rights to their work product can be severe under the agreement. Breaches and even threatened breaches constitute immediate and irreparable harm, entitling Dore's company to equitable, non-monetary relief, meaning contractors could be ordered to refrain from the activity. So it says non-monetary, which means he's not asking to be compensated. It says non-monetary, entitling Dore's company to equitable non-monetary relief. Boy, I tell you, this is interesting. The agreement further stipulates that breach entitled Dore's company to liquidated damages, which are agreed upon, damages for failing to meet a specific contractual obligation in the amount of $10,000 per breach. And then there's a screenshot of this here. So again, I just want to say this. You do have to remember that Jimmy Dore is a comedian. Jimmy Dore is not a politician. Jimmy Dore doesn't claim to be a journalist. What does he say all the time? I'm just a comedian, a jagoff comedian in my garage. He isn't a comedian. He's an entertainer. So based on what I've seen so far, none of this surprises. This is not shocking to me. Like, ooh, gotcha. I'm not getting that feeling. Let's go on. They have to be reasonable forecasts at the time of contracting of the harm, which this one isn't because it's $10,000 irrespective of what the harm is. Philip Harvey, a law and economics professor also at Rutgers Law, agreed that Dore's contract was heavily tilted in favor of himself, calling it very employer friendly. Harvey told Important Context Dore's attorney had been clever, drafting a contract with a financial amount that was high enough to disincentivize minor breaches of confidentiality, like being loose-lipped at the bar, but low enough for courts to allow in the event of major breaches, like writing a best-selling book containing personal details about Dore. Then don't sign the contract. Then don't sign the agreement. If you had a problem with what was in the NDA, then don't take the job. I mean, this is a no-brainer here. Like, come on. Like, I've had to sign NDA before at my previous employer, and I had to sign it because with the program that I worked with, part of that job involved us working with outside businesses. And it was those businesses that it was required that we signed an NDA. That's why sometimes you may have heard me say on here, there's some things I can't talk about in reference to that particular position. That's why. Now, I read the NDA, and if you don't feel comfortable signing it, you can always have someone on legal team look over it as well. But I'm sorry. This article, like, they're acting like these people were forced to sign this contract and do the job. They weren't. You should read everything that you sign before you sign it. And even then, you should have a lawyer or a legal professional look over the document. Let's go on. Moving on. Forced arbitration. The 4DP contractor agreement includes forced arbitration for disputes except in certain circumstances like union busting. In arbitration, parties submit disputes and claims to a chosen arbitrator. In this case, one affiliated with the American Arbitration Association rather than going through the courts. And then they explain like all the rules here. I'm not going to read through all of this, but I do want to highlight this piece here. The claims governed by this arbitration provision include, without limitation, claims for wages and other compensation, claims for breach of contract, expressed or implied, claims for violation of public policy, wrongful termination, and wrongful demotion, claims for fraud, misrepresentation, emotional distress, and other torts, claims for unlawful discrimination, harassment, yada, yada, yada. Listen to this part. Although common in many work contracts, sometimes preferred in union workplaces, and often faster than litigation, arbitration can present obstacles to relief for workers. Although common in many work contracts. So if it's common in many work contracts, why are you complaining about it in this article? Someone explain it to me. If this is a common practice, why are you complaining about it in this article? For example, it deprives workers of their ability to be heard by a jury. The 4D contract spells this out explicitly, stating the parties understand that by signing this agreement, they give up their rights to a civil trial in court of law and waive their right to a trial by jury. Okay, so again, the parties understand that by signing this agreement, again, they didn't have to sign the agreement. I don't know how else to explain this to people. I really don't. But you really have to pay attention to what you sign. Jesus, let's go on. Juries have jobs and they know that bosses overreach. That's coming from Hyde. Arbitration is much more favorable for employers. They can keep it secret. They don't have to have publicity. They don't have to face a jury. Every place that I've worked for has had arbitration, by the way. Just letting you know that. Once a decision has been rendered by an arbitrator, workers have little recourse. As the National Association of Consumer Advocates warns, arbitrators aren't required to take the law and legal precedent into account in making their decisions. There is no appeal or public review of decisions to ensure the arbitrator got it right. And then it goes into this whole spiel about arbitration, which you guys can look through. I'm not going to go through all of that. I'm familiar with this. Like I said, almost every company that I have worked for has arbitration. That's just how it works, to be honest with you. Okay, it goes on to say here, then the arbitrator has to be compensated on the basis usually of a daily charge, and that daily charge may be $800, $1,000 a day divided by 2. Now add your lawyer fees to that. Yeah. And again, this is all in the agreement that they agreed to sign. Interesting. Now, let's go on here. This is the kicker. Former friends and colleagues of Dore's told Important Context that they were not surprised by the mismatch between the comedian's rhetoric and the employer-friendly provisions in the 4DP agreement. I don't think he's grounded in ideology, so I don't think he views treating all workers the same way I would. That's coming from fellow comedian Dave Anthony, a former longtime friend of Dore's. Dan Evans, a former TYT associate, keep this in mind. TYT associate producer who worked on Dore's show Aggressive Progressives offered up a similar diagnosis, explaining he is not really that ideological, but knows a couple of his buzzwords and knows how to do his canned rants that he's been doing for almost a decade at this point. I mean, that sort of contract lines up with the kind of person who may have had issues with workers in the past and wants to protect themselves. But in like broader concept, this is a person who causes issues with people he works with. Okay, then don't work with him. Like, I don't know what to say here. I really don't. This is crazy to me. These people are not being forced to work with Jimmy Dore. You have a comment here from a former TYT associate producer complaining about it. And what's really interesting to me, a former TYT associate producer, you want to complain about Jimmy doesn't have an ideology or he's not ideological. Bruh, you worked at TYT. You worked for union busting Cenk Uygur. You worked for a network where Cenk Uygur didn't even want you guys to start a union. He didn't even want to let you guys unionize. Where's the hit piece article about that? Where's Dan Evans' quote about that? What's more important here? Do you guys see the problem? Oh, of course. Let's go back and get a TYT employee to say something about Jimmy Dore. As if I'm supposed to take that seriously. Jesus. Okay, let me go on to here. Evans told Important Context that he had a number of run-ins with the comedian at TYT and described him as a wild card who was prone to temper issues and like flying off the handle. Okay, then don't hang out with him then if that's a problem. Like, what the hell? Evans said Dore would kind of expect producers to be on his like beck and call in a certain way. Why didn't you say that back then, Dan? Explain this to me. How long Jimmy Dore been gone with TYT? How long has since he worked there? Here it is, 2023. Why are you coming up about this stuff now? Now you just now saying it. Why are you saying this now, Dan? He would yell at folks. He yelled at people. He yelled on air. So, I mean, why? This is not surprising. This is driving me crazy. This is not a shocker to me. This is not a shocker. He described one incident in which the comedian got into an on-air shouting match with another host over YouTube's removal of Alex Jones. Dore disapproved of the removal. According to Evans, Dore was popping in the veins, like yelling at the top of his voice, and refused to cut to break. Okay, this was on air. What does this have to do with the NDA? Do you see how they quickly went off topic? What does this have to do with the NDA, guys? Somebody explain it to me. Let's go on. I literally just walked into the studio and shouted over him that we're going to break, and then we cut to camera. That's a day in the life working with Jimmy Dore. Last April, Dore recalled the events as an example of his former TYT colleagues not listening to him. And here's a tweet here. And he says, I was warned about this very thing when I was still at TYT. Of course, they didn't listen, as they were solidly pro-censorship and still are, like most of the far left on YouTube. And he is retweeting Matt Taibbi there, saying he remembers when Alex Jones was removed. Most mainstream media critics said not to worry, censorship would only ever apply to extreme raging a-holes like Jones. Now, almost every day, independent media figures face suspensions or deletions, even if their content is accurate. And that's true. That has spread to other people. It wasn't just going to be the right that they were coming after. Evans also told Important Context that Dore made his colleagues, particularly his women colleagues, uncomfortable with his temper and sexually weird remarks, noting that sometimes it felt like he was doing crowd work in a comedy club. If it felt like he was doing crowd work in a comedy club, that's probably because, surprise, he's a comedian. Oh my God. Oh boy. He was like riffing off people's appearances to entertain an audience. Comedians do that. One target of Dore's was TYT host and journalism professor. Oh, that goes into the whole Anna thing. I'm not bringing that crap up again. I'm so tired of the whole Anna thing. Was ridiculous. Cenk Uyghur's TYT founder and CEO confirmed for Important Context that Dore's conflicts with his colleagues and producers were a factor in the split that occurred between the company and the YouTuber in 2019. Dore did not respond to repeated requests for this comment. Before I even say what I got to say, I want to share what Aaron Mate said. He responded to this. He said, I've tried to stay out of spats that don't involve me directly. But this hit piece by Walker Bragman on Jimmy Dore is too pathetic to ignore. Walker provides no evidence, just relies on the resentment of bitter TYT liars and faults Jimmy for enforcing standard contract provisions. So let's go on. He said JD is faulted for binding workers to respect his privacy via non-disclosure agreements, which barred discussing anything they learned about Dore, including his wife or their collaborators on the job, including details about their personal lives, finances, investments, and more. And it shows those screenshots there. And he went on to say, non-disclosure agreements are pretty standard. Does Jimmy not have the right to privacy? He does. That's why a TYT producer even has to admit that this provision lines up with the kind of person who wants to protect themselves. Exactly. The other of Jimmy's harsh provisions is that in the case of disputes, employees commit to forced arbitration. But down below, Walker admits that arbitration is common in many work contracts, sometimes preferred in union workplaces, and often faster than litigation. And again, he shows the screenshots that we just read. After admitting that arbitration is common and even preferred by unions, Walker compensates by claiming that arbitration deprives workers of their ability to be heard by a jury. Yes, and it also deprives everyone involved of time-consuming court cases and heavy legal costs. This is one of the reasons why I believe we had this at all the employees, all the companies that I've worked for, is because like the legal costs can be very expensive. Having zilch to go on, Walker turns to Jimmy's ex-colleague at the middle-aged McCarthyites, TYT. He maybe doesn't realize that they've already been caught lying about Jimmy, and he posts the link there. So he just lets them lie again. And then I want to continue this thread. Anna, the first fabulous, claims that Jimmy made comments about her legs. No, the original allegation, the one that TYT tried to make a fake Me Too him over to distract from calling me a Russian agent, is that he made a joke about her attire amounting to nice new skirt. See how they trying to change the story? Let's go on. I've covered that before as well. Jink, the other fabulous, confirmed that Dore's conflicts with his colleagues were a factor in the split that occurred between the company and JD in 2019. Walker deploys the passive voice to obscure that Jimmy quit TYT because he didn't want to work for them. On top of relying on known liars to falsely print Jimmy as anti-worker, it also didn't occur to Walker that one of his sources, union buster Jink Uger, is not exactly the model of pro-worker behavior. That's some important context to admit. This is the part that really got me, is just like, who was Jink Uger to say that someone else is anti-worker when he didn't even want his employees to unionize? Boy, I tell you, people really try. Crackety says, that name, Crackety says, NDAs are sus, Aaron, whether you like the boss forcing their employees to sign them or not. And Aaron said, so having signed them before, I guess I'm sus too. Yeah, this is a part here I really want to mention. Like I said, I did have to sign one for my last job. It's also it's not uncommon for that to happen in media spaces, obviously for good reasons. So to me, it's just, let me tell you what I think is going on. Pull this up here. Let me tell you what I think is happening. I really believe that this is less about Jimmy Dore having NDAs, and this is more about any attempt to try to take Jimmy Dore down. Now, why would they try to do that? What does Jimmy Dore tell you to do? Does Jimmy Dore support the Democratic Party? Wasn't Jimmy Dore the first person to call out the squad when they didn't force the vote for Medicare for all? Turns out he was right about the squad. Now, some people were invested in that strategy. Some people, entire shows were invested in that strategy. Some people didn't like that. But Jimmy continued to grow. So Jimmy already passed 1 million subs. So now that message is reaching more people. So what is happening is that you have someone who has a loud voice and has a large platform, and he's reaching more people about how corrupt both of these parties are. And he's not afraid to call out the progressives. He's not afraid to call out the squad the way that they should be called out. Why do you guys think they're going after Jimmy Dore? Now, let's be clear. Jimmy Dore is not perfect. But why are they always going after him? Because Jimmy Dore doesn't still support the Democratic Party. You see, because at the end of the day, even the ones that told us that we need to fight for the progressives, that they're the ones that we need to vote for and support, even when it comes to presidential races, when those people lose, they tell us to vote for the corporate candidate. Those people still want to keep you in the Democratic Party because at the end of the day, they're still Democrats. This is why they come after Jimmy Dore. And again, like I said, Jimmy Dore is not perfect. And I think they realize some of the things that they choose to ignore or they complain about that Jimmy says, they know he's telling the truth. Maybe they may wish they could say that too, but they know what would happen if they did. His mic got too loud. His voice became too loud. That's why they go after Jimmy Dore. Same reason why they come after people like me. It is funny because I'm a smaller channel. So coming after me just gives people more attention to me and it just helps me grow. FYI. I don't know why people haven't figured that out yet. Coming after me, it just gives people more attention and it makes me grow. Same thing with those of us at RBN. Every time people attack us at RBN, it just makes us grow more. That's stupid. You're promoting a smaller channel. So even people who didn't know about us, now they know about us. That's why they're coming after him. 2024 is right around the corner. And President Joe Biden so far said he's running again. And even if Marianne does run, I've already told you this, the DNC going to find some kind of way so that the person challenging him is not going to win. That's running through the Democratic Party on that side. What's going to happen then? Then those same people, not all of them, some of them who telling you to vote for Marianne, them same people going to tell you to vote for Joe Biden. Because you see this progressive strategy, it's just a way to funnel people into the Democratic Party at the end of the day. I'm sorry, but I'm just keeping it real. Look around. Where's Bernie Sanders with his so-called movement? Nowhere. But I thought, like, honestly, when I first heard about this article, I thought this was going to be something like, oh my God. And then I read the article and I was like, this is it. People are trying really hard, man. People are trying really hard. It's sad too. It's really sad. Some people, I don't want to call people's names because it is what it is. Some people, their channels really grew during the Bernie campaigns. And after Bernie suspended his campaign in 2020, it was kind of like, well, what do we do now? And some people felt like maybe the squad would be that answer, but it doesn't seem to be working out. And I told you, like half of the left is done with this strategy and half of them still want to kind of try. But I think more people are waking up and starting to see the writing on the wall. That includes many of you. That's why they're coming after Jimmy Dore. Jimmy messing up their gravy train. Jimmy messing up their money. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. And again, like I said, Jimmy Dore is not perfect, but Jimmy messing up that train that some of them got on and they got a little too excited about. All right, I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. And then I have a shout out that I want to do about another rally that's coming up. Thank you for the super chat. Josh, Walker Bragman has smearing dissidents of the machine. Oh, wait a minute. Walker Bradman, I think he meant was smearing dissidents of the machine for a while. And Jimmy Dore isn't the first one. Interesting. JB says some make their bread and butter off the Democratic Party and the squad. Yeah, and some of it's access too. A kid said, Sabby, the attempt to smear Jimmy Dore is proof Democrats are scared of him and mainstream media has fully taken notice of him. Subsequently, it means neolibs and boutique left also aware the gig is up. Yeah, it's up, dude. Shout out to Sylvia Ross for becoming a Sabby member. Give me a big whoop, whoop. Whoopity whoopity whoop. All right. I'm still going to do the call-in episode, but I do want to go ahead and remind you, smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. Hit the thumbs. Okay. quick shout out here. Some of you, if you cannot attend the rally in February, there is another rally, and I'm late on this. I just found out about this recently. I do want to make sure I shout this out. There is another Peace in Ukraine rally. Peace in Ukraine, say no to endless U.S. wars. March with us on the 20th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq to demand it. This is going to be March 18th. That's a Saturday at 1 p.m. And this is actually right outside the White House in D.C. And this is sponsored by Answer Coalition, Code Pink, that's Medea Benjamin's group, and the People's Forum. So again, I want to announce this again. This is Saturday, March 18th at the White House. Actions across the country, March 18th through the 19th. Protest on the 20th anniversary of the U.S. invasion of Iraq. Again, it's for peace in Ukraine. Why don't you guys follow them on Twitter at Answer Coalition? Give them a follow so that you can stay updated. And if you don't know about Code Pink, follow them as well so you know about this as well. Okay? Pass this on, guys, because this is not getting enough attention that it should get. And here are the demands. End the $100 billion in arms shipments to Ukraine in NATO. Stop the permanent war economy that funnels trillions of dollars away from jobs, education, and healthcare. Negotiations now, and no to war with China. So those sound like pretty good demands to me. Pretty good demands to me. So definitely check that out. Okie dokies. Yes. We have been doing shout outs here for Black History Month. We've been doing spotlight features for people. The other night was Amali Yeshitela. Tonight is going to be someone some of you may not have heard of, but you should know who she is because our history books have not been honest with us. I mentioned her last year. I didn't have as many followers then, so I'm going to mention her again tonight. But our history books have lied. Surprise! Because tonight's feature here, her name is Claudette Colvin. Now, why is Claudette Colvin important? Why should you know about her? Who was she? Let's see if anyone in the chat knows. So I'm going to tell you who she was. And I'm going to show you how our history books, they really messed us up, man. They really messed us up. Claudette Colvin. I don't know why it's doing that. Oh, there we go. Claudette Colvin. Listen to this story.
You have heard the story, but likely didn't know this name.
A lot of accolades went towards Rose, and nobody knew about Claudette.
Claudette Colvin was just 15 years old on March 2nd, 1955, when she refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus 9 months before Rosa Parks.
When the news reporters asked me why didn't I get up, I said, history had me glued to the seat. I said it felt as though Harriet Tubman's hand was pushing me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth's hand was pushing me down on another shoulder. And between these two historical women's, iconic women's, I could not move. I was paralyzed in that seat.
And largely omitted from history books despite her courage and boldness as a teen. Today, at 80 years old, she still recalls the day with clarity, remembering the exact exchange she had with the officer who tried to make her give up her seat.
And I repeat, I told him I paid my fare, and it's my constitutional right to sit here. So anyway, he yelled to the bus driver, he had no jurisdiction here. So we thought it was all over. If he didn't have no jurisdiction here, we thought it was over with because this is a traffic patrolman. So I wasn't breaking the law, just that the white lady didn't have a seat.
The magnitude of her act of defiance didn't hit her immediately, not until she heard the lock of the jail cell.
You can hear when the keys go click, or you hear that sound, right? They lock you in.
She says of sitting in that jail cell that those were the longest hours of her life, but those 3 hours would also change her life's trajectory.
I thought they knew. I thought people knew that there was people before Rosa. Her arrest record is what proved it. Because without that arrest record, you would only know of Rosa, because that was staged behind Claudette going to the NAACP at 15 years old. And once she got there, they said that a black girl, unwed, dark-skinned, could not be the face for the Alabama boycott.
Did you guys hear that part? This is why a lot of people don't know about her. Because of her complexion, they did not want her to be the face for the boycott. So that's why most people know about Rosa Parks, who apparently has a lighter complexion, had the appropriate complexion that they wanted. That's why more people know about Rosa Parks. And she got that credit for being the first person, the first African-American that refused to give up their seat, when in reality, it was Claudette Colvin. Colorism is very deep.
So Rosa Parks stepped up. She was the NAACP. I think she was the secretary at the time. And she stepped up. She was light-skinned. She was married. She fit the bill. She was black. And she went on the bus, refused to get up.
Before Claudette or Rosa, hundreds were arrested for doing the same. But it was Claudette who, along with 3 other women, became the first to challenge the law in the Alabama courts. The rest is history.
That's right. You have to remember, if it was not for that arrest record, you would not even know about Claudette Colvin. It is because she was arrested. And I bet you the history books still say Rosa Parks.
But what happened earlier this month in New York City
have this permanent recognition of this great civil rights activist.
In celebration of Women's History Month, Claudette Colvin finally got her due. Getting her own way, you could say. In the Bronx, New York, where she currently resides, at the corner of East Tremont Avenue and Unionport Road, you will now find Claudette Colvin Way. Fitting for a woman who has paved the way for so many others.
It took that many years for them to finally give that woman her just due. Claudette Colvin. If you didn't know about her, now you do. You see, guys, we even have to challenge the history books. I'm not kidding. All right, let's go ahead and move on over to call in. We're going to talk about this Jimmy Dore hit piece, and we can talk about other issues as well that we talked about tonight. This is episode 80, Jimmy Dore hit piece. Okay, you've seen it. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the recent article smearing Jimmy Dore as anti-worker. So let me make sure that I put the link in the chat so you guys can scoot on over to call in with me. Doobies. Let me go ahead and add this to the thing. All these updates, man. All right. So we're going to head on over to call in. Also, if you don't have the app, that's okay, because you can listen on your computer. You can use this link to enter the room on your laptop. You can also call in from your laptop. So I just entered the link. It's pinned to the top of the live chat. So let's go ahead and scoot on over there. Other than that, guys, I'll be back tomorrow night. Okay. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.